Good evening, everyone, and good morning to those on the other side of the world. My name is Harini. I'm a software engineer at Intrinsic, and I'm also a volunteer and a board member for Women in Robotics. I would like to start with talking a bit about Women in Robotics, especially my experience being part of the group. So, like many women in STEM, I've learned that creating opportunities for yourself is often essential. And there's one story I want to share that I'll never forget. It was a surreal moment, where I was an amateur, an international student, a fresh graduate, just proud of myself for quitting WIM successfully. And I found myself in the same room, well, virtual room, as Dr. Denila Roos, the dean of MIT. It was a virtual event, and I was as nervous as I could be. But it turned out to be an amazing casual conversation. And she actually said that she was enjoying herself. And that is a personal win that I could have never imagined for myself. So this is what the group gave me. It gave me a chance. And it wouldn't have been possible without Andra. And all the women who who paved the way for us, and my sincere gratitude to all of them. So yeah, that being said, I've realized what it feels like being accepted as is, being supported, and given a chance to find your own way, to build your own way. So being a part of this group means that you can make this group anything you want it to be. Uh, our community is growing stronger every day. And to become a member, either you can join our Slack community, subscribe to our newsletter, or join a local chapter like this one. This is the Bay Area chapter. There are posters around the room, which you can check out for more details about that. Or if you are looking for a more direct and a measurable impact, you can participate in one of our initiatives or start a new one. So usually they fall in either of these categories: Project Inspire, Connect, or Advance. Inspire, essentially, we aim to have a platform for new female engineers to just to show them what it feels like being a woman in robotics and what all things they can do. We have our 50 women you can know about annual list. So if you are looking for, the next time you're looking for a speaker or an organizer, check out those lists. You can probably invite an expert who's a woman. And then we have a newsletter. One of my favorite is the photo challenge. I'll tell you more about that. And we also started Women in Robotics Day, which is the first Wednesday of October. It would be nice to like have celebratory kind of events during that day, like this one. More details on the website. I don't want to talk about it. And one more announcement I want to make is we are starting the third cohort of our mentoring program. If you want to be a mentor or a mentee, please sign up for that. And we also have a scholarship for Project Advance. Check out the details. So yeah, my favorite is the photo challenge. What we did there was earlier, if you did a Google search for women building robots or women in robotics, you usually see like a feminine humanoid robot or some sort of scene where a woman is just watching a man build a robot or something like that. So and not an actual engineer working on, and not an actual female engineer working on the robot. So through the photo challenge, we urged people to take a photo of themselves in their labs or in their companies and submit it to Wikimedia, through which it would be like accessible to the public platform. And we aim to improve the visibility of women working in robotics. Like they say, you can't be what you can't see. It was a very small but a powerful change. So there are other such initiatives. And like I said, this group can be whatever you want it to be. So we are open to new ideas, new suggestions. If you are if you're an executive looking to make an impact, if you're just a fresher who are starting in this domain, you're welcome, and I hope you find your way. And today, it is an absolute honor to stand among pioneering women in the greater ROS community and hearing about their stories. So without further delay, let's welcome my peer and my close friend, Sanjiksha, who will be hosting them and the rest of the session.
Well, thank you so much, Harini. And that was a lot of information. Be sure to remember it. We are going to quiz you on it. We'll think. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Women in Open Source Robotics. I'm Sanjiksha, and I'm one of the organizers with Revati and Harini. And I am also a robotics engineer, currently working on drones and security. And it's a pleasure to see such a passionate and talented individual crowds. And tonight we are honored and incredibly honored to showcase the contributions of women in the open source robotics community. And with that, to kick off the event, I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Lucy Pobble. And Lucy has a decade of experience in Gazebo and ROS and currently leads the simulation team at Zipline. And please welcome Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, Delaney. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invite. How do I put my slides? Oh, thank you, everyone. It's been a while since I worked with Gazebo. I left Open Robotics a little bit less than 2 years ago. So it was interesting to put this presentation together for you today, looking back at the decade that I worked on Gazebo. Hopefully, I'm just gonna tell my story, the stages I went through, and I hope that some of it is interesting to some of you. So this is roughly the timeline of my experience with Gazebo, which ties with my time at Open Robotics. So in 2013, I started as a remote intern through the Outreach Program for Women. So I was working from abroad remotely. Then I was a remote contractor for almost a year. Then eventually I was hired to be a full-time software engineer with the team, and actually joined the team. 2019, I was promoted to senior, and then fast follow, became a supervisor, then the tech lead of Gazebo, and then at 2022, I left. So there's like 9 years, let's round it up to a decade. It's easier to say. So,
hi, I'm
mute, and on loop. Okay, I don't know how to use a Mac. Yeah, like my journey started as a remote intern. This was at the end of 2013, 2014. I had come straight out of college. I had a degree in mechanical engineering and then a master's in robotics. I knew very little about programming. The programming I learned at college was like MATLAB, you make a file and then you share it with a friend via email. That's all I knew about software. So I applied for this program. I was actually waiting for a visa to go work in a company in France, and I had a gap and this was a good opportunity for me to fill my time. And I wasn't very sure what to expect. I didn't know anything about open source. So part of the application was to open a pull request to a public project, and you had to have this account, and everything was very open, very searchable online. And I was like, I don't know if I want to like people to search my name and find these weird things that I'm gonna do here. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I, like, instead of using my actual name, I just used this nickname Chapulina. And I was just like, I hope nobody can tie that to my name. And my project was to do GZ Web Mobile. It was a mobile interface on a browser for Gazebo. So 3 months later, I finished the project. I was really excited. The whole thing was really fun. My mentors made it very interesting, Ian Chen and Steffi Papke. I learned a ton of different things that I had no idea about before. This is the video at the end, and you can see I put my actual name there. So by this time, I was just like, I'm not ashamed of this anymore. This actually like looks like something I can do. And I made that meme that is very 10 years ago with, you know, all of the things that I was seeing for the first time that I had no idea about. And that was very exciting to me. So after that, Open Robotics extended a contract for me to keep working with them, still remotely. So during that time, I extended my contributions from mobile to also to the desktop GZ web version. Was still working mostly on the browser, mostly on the GUI interface. And I was kind of like a digital nomad. You know, I didn't have a family, you know, I didn't have like anywhere to be. I was just working remotely. So this picture is me working from Malaysia. I was just, you know, like, why not? Like, I was not picky, could stay in hostels, very cheap. I had internet, I could work. So I was actually very productive. Like, people think that sometimes working remotely like this, you can be productive. But I was just like, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have anything to do. I was just like hanging out in the beach in Malaysia and working. So that was a fun year for me. And then eventually Open Robotics is like, well, do you want to come full time and join our team in Mountain View? And I was like, okay, sure, I can stop traveling for a bit. So I moved here to the USA, became a software engineer full-time, and I stopped working just on the web interface and started working on the native interface. So a ton of new things for me there as well. Like, I had never done C++, so I was learning all of these cool things. These are some of the interfaces that I developed that year, like the building editor, for Stork, GUI for Gazebo, the log playback. Of course, like a lot of these I contributed with other engineers on the team. But yeah, like a lot of my time was spent on these things, like all of the visualizations there that you see on the Now robot. So I felt like I learned so much that year, like, and I was getting more and more passionate about graphical interfaces and about Gazebo, about everything that I was doing. So it was a very good experience for me. Also that year, I was doing conferences and I was doing interviews. And to my surprise, I was in the list of the 25 women in robotics that you need to know about. And at that time, I had less than a year of a full-time career. I was like, oh my God, I must be doing something right. But at the same time, I was also like, oh my God, there are no other women? Like, why would they pick me? Like, you know, what have I done? And I was just like, you know, it was a bittersweet moment, because I was really like shocked that like I was going to be on that list. I had followed that list before I was on it. And I was like, you know, what have I done? Another thing that happened that year was I did a talk at CPPCon, and I totally felt like an imposter. I was like, I just started using C++. How can I do a talk at CPPCon? What do I possibly have to say to the C++ community? So I was there in my hotel room, like looking at my slides, thinking like, how can I, you know, is this content, how is it going to be received? And I just the night before, I was like, okay, I don't know C++ very well, but I know Gazebo. So let's put the slides inside Gazebo, and maybe that's going to distract people and they're not going to see that the content is so bad. So I just like put all the slides and I did the presentation inside Gazebo. And that turned out to set like a precedent for the rest of my presentation, where people always expected me to do the presentation inside Gazebo. I consider doing it today. I was like, maybe not. But yeah, that ended up being my SimSlides project that lived for a while. So after this, like the years 2016, 2018, I was still like really like getting to know the stack. I started moving more to the full stack, not only working on the graphical interface, so I also started doing a little bit more of ROS. I got the opportunity to mentor interns, and this is something that I was, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to take a little bit of the leadership track more than the IC, you know, individual contributor, like principal engineer track. I knew that I wanted to be on the more management side of things. So when I saw the opportunity to mentor interns, I was like, okay, this feels like the first step. And I really recommend to people that want to follow that track too, like if you have the opportunity, mentor other folks. Another thing that I did a lot those years was answer questions in Gazebo Answers, because I was not a user of Gazebo. Like I hadn't ever used Gazebo before I was working on Gazebo. So I didn't know like what it was used for, what were the pain points. And like we had this site where people would just come with questions. And I was like, well, this is a good way for me to help people and at the same time help myself learn the software, because there was like not a ton of documentation. A lot of the features were just like hidden inside the code. So I was just like, okay, this person is trying to do something there, and real user with a real need, let me try to do it for them. And then I would answer the questions. And I ended up being like one of the highest ranking users of the site, because I was just there like answering questions and learning Gazebo at the same time. Yeah, and like this GIF here in the middle is also like me just playing with Gazebo. Like you can see that I wasn't using Gazebo for robotics. I was just like on the weekends, I'm like, okay, I can draw dominoes in Gazebo and then like throw them. Like that was my fun, you know, it has nothing to do with robotics, but I was using a robot simulator as my playgrounds to just like have fun on the weekends. And another highlight of those times was the Space Robotics Challenge. So I think this was the first like big project that was handed to me, and I was given the opportunity to like implement it from scratch. I remember Nate, who was the CTO, he just gave me the contract, and he said like, here, these words, like make a simulation. And I was like, wow, okay, like I get to implement the whole code from scratch, design the worlds, work with of course, like I worked with Cole, our artist, like to create the meshes, but like all of the checkpoints, all of the logic in the game to reset, all of those things I had the opportunity to design from scratch, which was, I appreciated the faith that was put in me, and it was a very fun project to put together. So I also like designed the worlds that you can see there, like in the bottom right, like being generated randomly, so you could like at the click of a button create a new world. So I had a ton of fun like working on this project. And the one on the bottom left is a personal project of mine. Like since I was doing so many conference presentations, people were asking me like, oh, can you present about ROS2 and Gazebo and how they work together? And we didn't have any good like hello world examples of ROS2 and Gazebo. So I just put one together and I called Dolly. And then I ended up doing a bunch of presentations using Dolly, which is just like a robot sheep that follows the first thing that it sees in front of it. And exercises like all of the, the robotics loop. So it's a good hello world example. So very fun years. I feel like I grew a lot there, like got the opportunity to touch like all of the different parts of the stack. So yeah, like meanwhile, I was doing a ton of presentations and interviews, talking podcasts or like articles and being parts of panels. Like I didn't stop those years. Then in 2019, I was promoted to senior. That was not like a long time that I was like senior, because like right after I was promoted to supervisor. But like one key thing that happened during that time, which was like personally a milestone of mine, was to present at ROSCON JP. I went to college in Japan, but I never felt like my Japanese was strong enough. And then when we started having like, I think it was the first ROSCON that was not a ROSCON, was a local ROSCON, was the ROSCON JP. And I remember I went to Brian and told him like, hey, I know some Japanese, like if you can send me to ROSCON JP, I can write a report. And like it would be nice to go to Japan. So the next year I was the keynote speaker for ROSCON JP, and they told me like, you can speak in English. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do it in Japanese because I should know the Japanese by now. So it was another like thing that for 8 years I hadn't spoken Japanese. So I was like just studying Japanese and really like challenging myself. I'm sure it sounds to a Japanese speaker like I was Tarzan, but like it was the highest rated talk in the whole conference. So hey, I'm telling you, the slides inside Gazebo really like go a long way. People don't pay attention to what you're saying. So after that, I was the supervisor, and that was like about at the time when the pandemic hit. So at the same time, I was learning how to supervise like full-time employees and also being a remote manager, right? So throughout my time at Open Robotics, I supervised 8 engineers, and those were not necessarily folks that were working on Gazebo. Some of them were working on ROS, some of them were on infra. So it was a lot of like learning on how to communicate with folks. Like I didn't understand what they were working on a lot of the time. So it was a huge learning opportunity for me. And at the same time, also, I was promoted to Gazebo technical lead, which I did for my last 3 years at Open Robotics. Again, at the pandemic, so learning how to lead a very remote team. Some of the highlights of my time as a Gazebo lead, we migrated our code from Bitbucket to GitHub. And from Mercurial to Git. And at that time, like we had, like the project had tried a lot of different tools like Jira, Asana. I was like, let's migrate everything to GitHub and really like set that GitHub workflow to really like make it an open source project that is visible to the whole community. Let's try to gather more contributors. Like it started the Gazebo community meetings. I was the lead of Gazebo through 6 Gazebo releases, including New Gazebo and Gazebo Classic. It was like our first venture into having all of these distributed packages without all of the fancy tooling that ROS already had to handle like different packages and releases. So it was a lot of trying to set that up. What does CI look like, right? Like continuous integration when you have so many libraries that are interconnected. Like how do we time the end of life for all of these libraries, and how to connect them together, how to make sense of all of this for the users. So it was a lot of like these unique challenges that were coming up at that time. Another thing that I'm proud of is with the new Gazebo, really like saying that we have to have demo worlds for based on my difficulty seeing people in Gazebo answers, having trouble figuring out what features Gazebo has, how do I even use it? I was like, okay, every new feature that you put in Gazebo, create a demo world. We have this folder full of demo worlds, and it's okay, the minimum viable product that you need to just showcase that feature. And then, so any user that is looking for how do I do buoyancy? How do I do the lift drag plugin? You have the minimal set of things that you need just in that thing. It's not embedded in a huge project like things used to be before. Another thing that I kicked off was the Python interfaces for Gazebo. Another big pain point for Gazebo has always been the C++ interfaces. So I really pushed the moment I was given a budget, I'm like, okay, let's get some Python interfaces there. I didn't get to bring it all the way to the finish line, but I know that the team is still working on the Python interfaces, and I think it's really gonna democratize Gazebo a little bit more. So nowadays, at 2022, I left the Open Robotics. I felt like I had a good run, and it was super fun. Loved the team, loved the project, but at the same time, I felt like for my career, I had to experience something new. I had to get out of my comfort zone, and I did. I joined Zipline 2 years ago, and it's been a ride. It's a cool company. We're saving lives every day. We just completed 1 million deliveries with our platform one, which is the one on the right. And my team has been doing all of the simulation and visualization stuff for the platform two on the left. And we're hiring, especially senior engineers. So if you're looking for a change, you're interested in drone delivery and a mission-driven company, let's chat. And that's all. Thank you. Is there time for questions? Yeah, any questions? Yeah.
How different has it been maybe from working on open source visualization software to sim in production for something like that?
Yeah, the question is how different was it moving from the open source world to the proprietary world? It's a lot is different. I feel like you can move a little bit faster when you're all of your users are in the same room as you. So you can just agree. And we have a mono repo in Zipline. So it's just you make a change and you know that everything that you could possibly break is there, and you're not going to merge the pull requests until you fix all of them. So in that sense, you move much faster than when you're in an open source project, you have a lot of users that you make promises to, and you can't break the APIs. The process becomes much more involved for a good reason, right? So it's a little bit faster, but at the same time, it's a little bit more overly just for our use case, right? The simulator and visualization tools that we're putting together only work for our stuff, right? It's not general purpose. So it's a different way for you to think about things, which is interesting. Yes.
I'm just curious about Zipline. You say mission driven, so what kind of missions?
Yeah, so what kind of mission Zipline has? So we mainly our platform one right now delivers. We started delivering blood in Africa, so we deliver right now in 6 or 7 countries, and we've been mainly delivering emergency supplies. So it has extended from blood to other things that are essential. And with Platform 2, we're also delivering other kinds of things, but it's very focused on this healthcare use case of you need something very urgently that is very specific, sometimes snake venom is something that is very, the anti-venom is very specific that you need to have in a timely fashion. So it's a perfect use case for a drone because people are going to pay the price that, right, that you need. It's going to save a life, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I think when I see this from everyone's perspective, that this was a truly enjoyable talk. I have not had fun so much recently listening to your talk. So thank you so much, and very inspiring. I personally come from mechanical background, and it is daunting to see the robotics world out there. But thank you so much for that. And with that, we move on to our next speaker, Deanna. So one more second. So Diana is joining us from the other side of the world, and Diana was a part of the ROS team at Open Robotics from 2016 to 18, and now she designs mathematical algorithms for innovative robots at Lexis. And please help me to welcome Diana.
Thank you. It's nice to follow on from Louise. We were actually housemates when I was at Open Robotics with her. So, hi, Louise.
Hi.
I'm going to take over your screen share if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I imagine we're aligned. But since I'm not there in person, I'll try not to use slides so that you can have a more engaging talk. I'll just share this quickly.
I think you should be able to share.
Okay. Any luck?
Yes. Yeah, we can see.
Okay, this is just a prelude. All right, so my name is Diana, as you heard. I have been asked to reflect on how being a dev on the ROS2 has impacted my career, which has been pretty fun to reflect on, but I won't assume that we're all familiar with the robot operating system. So I'll say that ROS2 specifically that I was involved in was a complete rewrite of ROS1, but both are free and open source software for robotics developers so that they can more easily develop software for their robots. And as you can see, it's been used in like thousands of different types of robots, from the Robonaut on the International Space Station, which Alison Thaxton has a really great podcast about her time working on that, to like Antarctic exploration, subsea exploration with Laura Lindsay, for example, and everything in between. So who has been making the software that the world's robots use? This was us in 2018, at least. I was there 2016. I started in 2016 when it was more like 5 of us. And I went there specifically to get better at software engineering. After a master's in robotics, my bachelor's were in electrical engineering and maths, and I wrote a lot of MATLAB scripts, but I wanted to get better at like production level software. And I did. I got raked over the coals in code review, like my first year especially. After a while, I wasn't an intern anymore. I was given full features to develop, like the logging system and those logging macros that you use in RCL CBP, which, if you didn't realize, they're macros specifically as opposed to the logger objects in Python, so that you can get rid of them if you have particular compiler optimizations for high performance systems. But this was my first like real job, and I didn't realize how important it was, like the people that you worked with. So that was one of the lessons that I learned, was that, you know, it matters who you're working with. And I didn't really evaluate that as I was considering working there. I was there just for the work, but I got lucky. And I have some suspicions for why. But yeah, that was, I learned a lot from those guys, and I learned a lot about myself as well. One thing that I learned about myself was, like, we were working on software, not robots.
Diana,
Yes?
you stop sharing screen.
Yeah, I have intentionally stopped sharing so that you have something more to look at. Although that GIF, Louise recorded that GIF for us. So thank you, Louise from the past. So yeah, people were really shocked when they would come to the office that there were no robots. And after management saw that pogo stick GIF, there were no pogo sticks either allowed anymore. But I really loved working with robots myself. It was, so I went, after a while, I left Open Robotics to go back to working directly with robots. But like I said, I learned a lot. And I was asked specifically to comment on how working on ROS has shaped my career. And the things that I mentioned so far, you probably could have learned in any company. So like, what was it about working at the time, Open-Source Robotics Foundation? For me, one of the things that I learned was, like, nonprofits don't pay as well as working at Google, for example, but they do pay in other ways. So it was a a prestigious role for other reasons, and I kind of felt like we're in this like elite special ops team, and we could trade in that prestige for respect and visibility in a very niche community of open source robotics. I'll talk more about visibility in a minute, but yeah, I had already known from other work that I'd done that like this visibility can be a reward that you get for work that maybe doesn't pay financially like other organizations do. So I'd already been like on TV and had IEEE Spectrum coverage and a TED Talk for other products that I had been involved in. But ROS itself, like we were helping roboticists. We weren't helping directly like children with handwriting difficulties. So it was nice to know that even being on such an abstract like software engineering project, in the right community, like roboticists still really appreciated the often thankless work that we did. And I think that that's why there were like coincidentally nice people at Open Robotics. Like we weren't there for the money. Like we were really motivated by the product, and it was, I think we all knew it was kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity to work on a product that we believed in and that would benefit a community that we cared about. So that's why like the turnover rate was pretty low, especially compared to other places in Silicon Valley. And yeah, like at the heart of ROS is a product, you know, it's like it's a product, but the product by itself is nothing compared to what comes when you combine it with what the real heart is, which is the community and the collaboration. And we're very thankful for that collaboration, because without it, like it's not possible to do so much work with so few people. So people from NASA or DARPA would like visit the office and they'd become terrified that software that they relied on like so heavily was, you know, there were 5 people in front of them, and it's like, whoa, this can't be sustainable. But it's like, no, we're more than the people that you see in front of us, because what makes ROS successful is the packages that have been released by robotics developers from literally around the world. And a lot of them originally were developed by the ROS1 team, you know, Melanie Wise and everyone at Willow Garage. Like they spearheaded so much robotics development in ROS specifically for the PR2. But these days, like the community is all of us. So that's like the main thing that I took away from my time working on ROS, was like I really came to appreciate and internalize that through collaboration, each of us individually can build our own robots that are better, and we can do it faster, which is great for me because like I've made some cool robots thanks to this community, thanks to all of us. And I've taken that ethos of collaboration with me into some pretty resource constrained startups that I've worked in since I left Open Robotics. So in my previous role, I was the only roboticist at an early stage medical device. It was a skin printing robot for burns treatments. And I knew instinctively when I bought this like niche medical robot arm from KUKA, I was like, okay, how do I not reinvent the wheel? And I was explicitly reaching out to other roboticists. Like they didn't know me, but I'm like, hey, you're using the same robot as me. How can I leverage your experience so that I don't have to start from scratch? Because that's what ROS really is fundamentally about, is that that other people working on seemingly completely unrelated robotics applications, they're probably solving the same problems as you. And so even though I was working on this like niche bioprinting application, I knew that other people would be working on very similar fundamental robotics problems, and we should be working together. So today I'm working on a different robotic medical device now, and it actually uses mapping in the robotic sense, the same way that warehouse robots do. Like I'm doing mapping of patients' veins for better dialysis treatment. And this is like the joy of robotics, but that's another talk. But I'm on a small robotics team again, and just using ROS itself, you can get a huge way in terms of like accelerating robotics development on small teams. But I'll say again, because it's often forgotten, that like ROS is more than the software, but it's this community that lets us all go faster together. So this year I created the ROS medical user community, so to bring together people from different companies who are also working towards FDA clearance of ROS-enabled medical devices, so that we can learn from each other, and through collaboration, we can each bring our own medical robots to market faster and save lives sooner. Like that's the goal. And so far it's working out great. Our product has already benefited, and I've mentored lots of other people. But this is the power of collaboration that's come with me through the rest of my career. So I have a question for you then. Where, if you can just reflect on it, or like 2 a.m., like maybe you'll think of an idea, but like where in your life can you use more collaboration or more community? And think about it, because over the past year, I have started 3 or 4 different communities intentionally because of asking myself this question, like, where can I use more collaboration or community in my life? So, all right. Another big theme at a place like Open Robotics is openness. And the majority of our work was public, which means that now I can show my GitHub profile. I can highlight specific features that I worked on in my portfolio. And this is really great. If you haven't, I took that for granted, and now I really miss it, because to be able to showcase not just like your work to employers, but also like your collaboration style, and that you're a nice person during code reviews, it's really powerful stuff. And for me as a developer, often on small teams, like that I can go back and reference these really high quality code bases that I learned from in future years. That's a powerful thing for open source that has benefited me. And if you're not getting any of this from your work at the moment because it's closed source proprietary, then I'd encourage you to contribute to open source projects yourself, so that you can build that public portfolio. Okay, a question I got asked to comment on is like, what place is there for women in open source robotics? And I'm actually going to answer a different question instead, which is like, what does open source have to offer women? We of course have a lot to offer it, but specifically for me, I first got into open source because I had a hard time, still have a hard time, like talking about my achievements in job interviews. And I remember once a recruiter on a phone screen asked me like, "Oh, Deanna, like, how are your C++ skills?" And I answered honestly, like, I know people who are better at it than me, which, given the company that I kept, was true, but was not the most useful thing to say. And so I use open source as like a life hack, where I wanted something to point, I wanted like hard facts to point to, instead, as like a crutch for myself, speaking about myself. So I said, well, now I can say, well, I've contributed these like really hardcore C++ features to Eigen, and then they can draw their own conclusion. And what's powerful for underrepresented groups is that you don't have to ask anyone's permission for this. Like, you can do that without anyone's gatekeeping. You don't have to like do a bubble sort whiteboard algorithm before you're allowed to fix a bug. And there's no one there saying like, sorry, you have to be a tech bro, whatever. Like, it's up to you to, anyway, it's very theoretically accessible. There are some other boundaries, but I'll talk about how we can help each other for that. But yeah, no one on GitHub knows that I'm a woman, or at least I don't tell them. And Brian the CEO at Open Robotics, used to laugh when I was running this robot simulation competition as D Hood, and I would get emails addressed to Mr. Hood, and he was like, there's what's that about? I'm like, that's not an accident as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's a strategic choice of mine to be D Hood, let people make their own assumptions instead of Deanna, because once you're aware of the biases, if you're not like, I became maybe like too well aware of the impact that changing a name on a resume to give different gender and racial connotations, like how that impacts people's perception of the same, literally the same resume. And so then, everyone can make their own choice about what to do with that. And for me, it was to sort of be a little bit anonymous or less hidden online. These days, I've kind of made it now. Like, I'm not, or enough, I'm certainly not infallible when it comes to technical anything, but I can weather an unreasonably high expectation or two. And that's helped still by like industry recognition that I've achieved and different career accomplishments. So these days I can be D Hood or Deanna Online. Like, I don't care so much. But my point is that you as an individual, like, you don't have to be visible all the time if you don't want to, even if like it would be nice if there's visibility for women. We can achieve that actually just by some of us being visible some of the time. And we can sort of tag team it however we want. And this year, for the second time, I'll be giving the keynote at RosCon, and I'll do it in a dress if I feel like it. Like, come at me, bro. I'm well enough established by now. So we're talking just a bit about visibility. I have another reflection for you when I find the right thing to share, because I want you to think as well. Personally, I just love reflecting. So this is a question from before, but I want you to think, like, who are the women that you look up to professionally? And how did you find out about them? Because you can only really find out about visible people. And what are you doing for professional visibility, either for yourself or for other people? And then how are you staying reminded that these women exist? Because role models are powerful, really powerful for me at least. But it helps when you can get more use out of a role model if you actually interact with them more regularly. So reflect on that if you want. And otherwise, the last point that I wanted to make is, just quickly, that like visibility thing, it doesn't have to be like RosCon keynote. Like, you can, being visible can be just teeny tiny, like micro visibility. And so my decision to move to Silicon Valley to work on the ROS team was in a really large part influenced by the presence of Jackie Kay interviewing me for the role. And like, the fact that they didn't pull me aside and was like, hey girl, like, get out of here, was really important to me. While in a time that I was like, I'm pretty sure Silicon Valley isn't a welcoming place for women. That was the impression that I got, because you only hear bad news articles, right? But that they were happy there made me optimistic, and so I took the leap, and like, the rest is history. So, visibility can be really powerful, even when it's really subtle. Well, yeah, you know now that I think there's huge power of contributing to open source, power to us, and if the next question is like, how do I get involved in it? Without a doubt. Oh yeah, here we go. So I have been collating, I still use ROS2. I've been collating different enhancements and features that I would like someone to work on. And I started this open source channel in the Women in Robotics Slack channel, so that specifically you, if you want, can use them as stepping stones for entering into open source. So I'll post them and support you in whatever way you need support. Like I'll benefit from your contributions as well. But if you need the time and resources to contribute to open source, like I can't really help you with the time stuff, but for financial support, you heard Louise's involvement with Outreachy, and a physical space to go and work on open source. I really loved my time at the Recurse Center. That's where I made that contribution to IGA and OpenCV, that sort of thing, that you can build up that portfolio. So I'll put some links to those in that QR code, or if it stops working, I'm sure you'll find them online for the people who are recorded. But otherwise, I'm here to support you in that getting started. I also have like a workshop coming up for the Women in Robotics circle that I run around like making your first meetup presentation or conference proposal, that sort of thing. But you know, the reason that I like to support other people is because it's without a doubt that I wouldn't have been able to achieve the career that I've had as a single roboticist without this ethos of collaboration that I learned like originally at Open Robotics. And so I hope that you can take this with you and amplify the impact of your own robotics career too through collaboration and support. And I'd be very happy to help. And otherwise, I'll see you on GitHub.
Any questions?
I have to say it's very anticlimactic when you don't, it filters out even the sound of applause. So I'm just gonna clap for myself.
We have a question actually.
Cool.
You mentioned the medical robotics group that you started. I'm curious, what are the biggest challenges that you've seen for companies that are trying to get FDA clearance and using open source stuff?
Well, okay, let me think before I answer. That's the thing that I'm working on. I think that the part of what the challenge is that there have been supply chain attacks where like previously open source, if you don't pin your versions, for example, and they just move without you, like once a maintainer just gave maintainership to someone else and then they injected dangerous code that drained all these crypto wallets and stuff. So people are highly skeptical. But so that's one of the challenges. But what is nice about it compared to other industries is that actually the FDA is on our side. Ultimately, they want us to get products to market, helping people. And as a result, if you can justify your safeguards, it is kind of an open argument. And I'm working on an imaging device. I'm not working on a surgical device. So I think I have an easier argument to make. And I'll be actually running a session in a couple of weeks about how like you can make that a mathematically robust, logical argument. Jeff Biggs is helping use our robot as a use case. And then extra details about that, you can come to one of our community events, or that's pretty much what the talk will be about at RosCon as well.
Awesome, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, we have one more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so moving from kind of open source work and choosing to go more into medical robotics, what made you choose medical robotics specifically as you made that transition?
Yeah, it's a coincidence. Or like it's I work on robots that help people. They're the products that attract my attention. But I've also worked on like educational robots and robots or products for disability. And this is, so medical is in that category, but I won't turn down any interesting product. And the reason that robotics is so powerful in this is because robots are needed in all of these different fields. And if at the moment I'm working on a SLAM problem, like, so is someone working on like underwater mapping. Like Laura Lindsay's also working on a SLAM problem, but it's for underwater robotics. And so my skill, even being so specialized, is actually really transferable when you abstract it away from the final application. And I don't need to know, I'm not a medical engineer, despite what everyone seems to think. Someone else working on these products with me brings the medical expertise. You don't have to be an occupational therapist or a doctor or a teacher. Like, I work with these people and they bring that expertise and I bring the robotics expertise.
Yep. Thank you.
We have a question from the online community. How can one follow your medical robotics?
Yeah, if you Google Ross Medical Community, you'll find a post that'll link you to a mailing list where you'll get the events emailed to you. And if you see a space for a community that you think should exist, you can also reach out for like, hey, what was it like to start your own community? Because I'm probably not the first or the last person to find a niche where there's opportunity for more collaboration between roboticists.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much, Diana. It was a really inspiring speech. And with that, we moving on to our next speaker. Well, once again, so thank you, Diana.
Thanks for having me.
So now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Catherine Scott. Kat has built innovative computer vision and robotics applications at startups like Sight Machine and Temp Automation, led image analytics teams at Planet and 3Scan, and is currently a developer relations engineer at Intrinsic. So please help me welcome Kat.
Hi, guys. All right. So I don't have any grand things to tell you. I like simple things. So I think if I had to summarize like 3 or 4 or 5 simple things I've done through my career, first is I only do cool stuff and then I talk about it. That's a really important one. I try not to do evil things. Those are the big ones. I think those are the most important ones. And I don't think you need a lot of thought behind everything. Oh, and the other one, and I will prove this through the talk, is that there are 2 types of companies out there. There are companies that use open source to build interesting things, and then there's liars, because that's what everyone, I've never seen anyone not use open source to build interesting things, and that's why it's really important. So this, I don't even want to say how long ago this was. This was maybe 20 years ago. So this is baby me when I was an undergrad. So I grew up in Section 8 housing. I somehow got into a decent school. I had no money. And they're like, well, what you have to do is you have to go get this job. You know, if you go get a job on campus, we'll give you a few bucks. You can go work in a lab. I'm like, sounds great. So I got it. There was like a book. This used to be in a binder. And they put out the binder on like the 3rd day of school. And you go through the binder and then you email the professor and do the thing. So I'm like, I'm going to get there the first day. I'm going to go find the coolest thing. Email the professor. Professor ended up being Dan Kodachek, who's a related robotics professor, control theory professor. So I ended up working at that lab for about 2 or 3 years in undergrad. So this is me next to Senator Carl Levin, who used to be the Senate Armed Services Chair Committee lead, something of that nature. Very famous old senator, and I got to demo robots and learn how these things worked, and I got to see the early days of basically robotics development before we had things like, there used to be a time before GitHub. There used to be a time before ROS. There used to be, you have to build all these things from scratch. It was kept at your lab. Somebody might email you some code or something like that. It was really rough. I actually double majored in EE and CE. So I spent the later half of my undergrad doing MEMS work. So I built like MEMS sensors. I actually moved to our sister DARPA lab doing brain implants on rats and helping design like chemical coatings for those. And that's what I did the last few years of school. also did a lot of partying in undergrad because I think this is really important. And it turns out that when I was an undergrad, I needed a cheap place to live. I ended up moving into a hippie co-op, throwing parties. Turns out throwing parties, hanging out with people, trying to raise rent, huge skill for actually organizing people as you get older. Which is really, it's really weird. I go back to Michigan now and they say, we're really concerned about the undergrads. They're very concerned about their career and they're not developing social skills the way they need to. And so I just wanted to say that, like, no, I actually tried to do a lot of fun things. It's important to go out and talk to people and do fun things because that's how you develop social skills. That's how you develop networks. And it makes you a more well-rounded person. So I finished up in 2005. I was desperately in debt. I really wanted to go to grad school. I had no money, so I decided to go get a job. The best job that popped up for me was I ended up working at a little 50-person defense R&D company in Michigan that was actually a woman-run business, which was pretty cool. They let me write defense contracts at 23, and if I won them, I got to do them. I got to hire the people to do them. So I ended up doing that for like 5 or 6 years. I did work on augmented reality, computer vision work. What else we did? We competed in the DARPA Urban Challenge, but I was not competing in it. At that point, I was managing all the projects so the senior engineers could go run everything. That helmet you see is really weird. There's a bunch of air bladders in there so you can move a heads-up display, like as it's on somebody's head. Just a series of like every 6 months, another weird, crazy project all strung together by bits and pieces of open source. So I did that for about 5 years, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should try to do something else. Maybe I should actually do the graduate school thing because I'm not completely in debt. So I ended up going to Columbia. It turns out, no, academic thing was not my thing. I did a little bit of augmented reality research. I actually ended up spending most of my time at a hackerspace, which was cool because it was the hackerspace where people were building the first, commodity 3D printers, and I met all these wonderful people. So partying worked out again, which turned out as soon as I kind of finished undergrad, I ended up going with a bunch of my friends who were some of the early editors at Slashdot, which before there was Hacker News, there was Slashdot, and that's where all the open source people hung out and talked about their Linux distros if they weren't talking on some mailing lists. So we put together our first, my first startup, and we were working on things basically like computer vision for manufacturing applications. So I did stuff like, hey, can we use a scanner to do grain analysis for bolts that are used to put together, heavy industry or heavy equipment? That picture on the right is, we rebuilt a Chrysler assembly line in our very big, very cold office so that we could replicate doing basically visual inspection of vehicles. And all of this was done actually through an open source library that I was the maintainer for. So that was kind of my first toe really into like maintaining a big open source library. Sort of concurrently with this, I reunited my love of robotics. I was coaching first team. I still actually keep in contact with a couple of these students. So again, having fun, go do fun stuff. It's always worth it. Now I know all these students that have now finished up and have engineering degrees of their own. Totally worth it. So after that, I moved on and actually worked on my first ROS project, which I went and worked with a company in Boston. And what they were doing is like Google Maps, but with thermal cameras. So they would drive around Boston at night, look at all these buildings, and like you can actually see with the thermal camera, oh, this building is just leaking heat. It like basically there's these buildings that leak heat cost 10 times as much as regular, like well-insulated buildings. So we were building this car. It was not going well for this team. So it was really, they were writing everything. I mean, it wasn't a robot per se, right? Like it is because somebody's driving it, but it's reading data, logging that data, analyzing that data, and spitting out a result. And we were doing everything by hand. And a friend of mine's like, this really is not the way to do this. And he's like, I used to use this thing at Ross in grad school. We should come in on a weekend and see if we can redo this. And that's what we did. We took a 3-day weekend. We came in, we actually took all the sensors that were gonna be on the car, dropped them onto a cart, like one of those push carts that you put cleaning stuff on, put a super long extension cord, took it outside. And this is fairly early days of Ross, and we actually got, farther than they had gotten in years in like 3 days using Ross. And that was when I was sort of sold. So this is probably about 2011, 2010. Was also doing fun stuff. I was hanging out with a friend of mine out at Harvard, and he's like, we do all this rat research. These rats, you buy these boxes, the Skinner boxes to do this research are like $15,000. They were doing behavioral studies. And you're like, that's really weird. Well, you know what would be fun? I have pet rats. What if we just rebuilt Skinner boxes? It's super cheap. I got a 3D printer. I can get like this was like right when the Raspberry Pis are starting to come out. What if we can just put this all together? So do cool things, build it. I ended up running into a bunch of people in the open hardware community at this point and learning all about open source hardware. So after that job, I actually ended up moving out here to California and starting a second company called Tempo Automation. We were building electronics manufacturing robots. So this robot down here on the right is also ran ROS. I did that for about 2 or 3 years and hired their first team and got them through their early Series A. The photo at the top is just using ROS to do very precise calibration of the cameras on this electronics manufacturing robot. You know, it turns out your tolerances when you're building things like a circuit board tend to be in the microns, like tens of microns. So you have to use a lot of computer vision to kind of teach the thing to calibrate itself. After that job, I ended up going over to Planet Labs, who also uses a ton of open source in their pipelines for analysis. I started out working on their rectification team, so taking all these satellite images that were coming off these satellites on the right and lining them up to images on a map on the ground so that we know exactly where that image lines up. That moved in, and then I also did a lot of that all work used GDAL actually, which is a huge open source package. It's actually used by in spots in Gazebo. And then went on to using like a ton of OpenCV and a bunch of other tools to do things like cloud detection in satellite imagery. You know, depending on what part of the world you're in, a significant portion of your images are just covered by clouds. They are not worth processing. They're barely worth taking down off the satellite. So I started off doing analysis first on the things that are coming down from the ground, whether we want to put them through this expansive rectification process, and then eventually ended up taking that same application, rewriting it in C and putting it on the satellites themselves. So the images that kind of didn't work well didn't come back down on the ground. So that all went great. And then they actually had me start building out their initial image analysis team. So by the time I left, I think we had about 14 people working on analysis at Planet. Actually, I watched, if you're looking for something interesting to watch, there's a documentary that just came out about all this. They have actually have the products I built on them. I was like, whoa, I could actually have something in a movie. But all of that software, both on the ground and up in the satellites, is all open source. These little dudes, they all run Linux. They're just basically flying cameras. Most of your cameras actually run Linux as well. So I did that. Other fun stuff I've done. Oh, I didn't know there would be sound. Well, so pause this, but you get the point. So, so this is just a photo, you know, doing other fun stuff, meeting all these other interesting hardware people that do open source hardware work. We'd go to places like DEF CON, which is the big computer security conference, and put together these badges that are full of hardware, share the designs, borrow other people's software, other people's board design to go build all these crazy badges. We actually got our badge on the DEF CON 26 t-shirt, which I thought was kind of a flex. So after that, I ended up working at a company called 3Scan. So this is a rat liver with cancer. So 3Scan is or was at this point, a 3D microscopy company. So they would basically take very small sections, very thin slices of tissue through a giant block of tissue and then image it down at the micron level. So you get this huge, thick cube of data that you can do deeper analysis than you would be on a single microscope slide. So that was fun. That whole pipeline was open source again. Like, we're still using the same OpenCV. We're still using all the computer vision tools that you'd use anywhere else. So everyone uses open source. It's the tool that everyone uses. At some point, there was an acquisition. I was not very happy at that point, and I got an email from Tully and Brian, and they're like, hey, we need somebody to run this open source community for us. We need somebody to come and like control the websites run and all the events go off and all the communication that needs to get done gets done. And I'm like, heck yeah, So anyway, now I spend most of my time, trying to keep up with our Stack Exchange website, with our Discord, with our social media, with the docs, with the ROS2 Technical Steering Committee, or Technical Governance Community now, ROS Discourse. I also help with special projects like helping design the TurtleBot 4, which is the latest incarnation of the TurtleBot, and put together events, like help to put together ROSCon and ROS by the Bay, which is our meetup that's here on Thursday. So if you're having fun this evening, please come back again on Thursday night, same time, same location. And then also helping support the OSRA, which is the organization that's now governing all of this open source. I think it's a big honor to be able to keep these projects going because, I see it, I don't think everyone else sees it, how many people, how many organizations are supporting and using these products and these software projects. It's in the thousands of projects. So when I say everyone uses the open source, I'm quite serious. Everyone really does use open source, and your contributions do end up getting used by people. And then also other fun stuff. While I'm at it, I'm also on the board of the Open Source Hardware Association, which is a similar org for basically open sourcing hardware designs. This is their board from a couple years ago. We put together events like the Open Hardware Summit, where we get a bunch of interesting people to come and talk about how, we may not always be talking about robotics. There's certainly aspects of OSHA that are dealing with robotics, but it could be something like open science hardware or, open farm equipment or all manner of things. And we've also rolled out things like certification. So I am the one who gets to see when all of the certification projects come in. So if you have a piece of open hardware that you'd like to gift to the world, and you want somebody to check that you've done all the things to put together the correct license and the correct documentation files, that's part of what I do now. So that's me and my role with open source. If you have any questions, you can find me at the places below, and I'll take any questions you might have. Yeah. Oh,
What's your favorite part of what you're doing now?
my favorite part?
What's some of the interesting fun parts?
I like seeing the library. I like seeing the baby startups, and I like seeing the libraries. I like to see the stuff as it's coming out, meeting all the new people that have like some brilliant idea and are super excited. That's the real fun part.
So how has it been transitioning to a role as a developer advocate? I'm not even fully sure what that means, except for the slide that you just used to explain that.
It's flexing a different set of. I mean, it's weird. Like if you're already managing people, you don't get to code that much to begin with. Like I miss it. Like I think everyone who manages or does like a lot of other stuff, all of these peripheral things, really misses doing development work. But it's not like, it's just a different kind of it, right? Like before I was managing 12 or 14 or 4 people to do this one thing because an executive said to do it. Now it's much more nebulous, right? You have all these different people with all these different concerns, and it really is kind of like, a big party, and you have to deal with all these people doing all these different things in all the different corners of the house and make sure the house doesn't burn down and make sure you raise enough money to cover your rent. It's very, very similar. Yeah.
What is the most interesting thing you're seeing coming out of the open source hardware community now?
Well, quite frankly, the open science hardware is another one. Like, there's a realization that to have reproducibility, you have to reproduce apparatus, right? You have to that apparatus may not necessarily, not everyone can have a $5,000 piece of equipment that you really like. If you really want things to be reproducible, which there's quite a reproducibility crisis right now, you need to document how the whole thing's put together and then share it. And sometimes these designs are really quite clever, and all of a sudden, a researcher you know, in a country that's not in the US or EU, now that they know how this thing is built, can operate at a level that like some well-regarded research lab is at and make huge contributions.
Good question.
Cool. Got one more? Well, thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Cal. It was an amazing presentation. And with that, we move forward to our next and final speaker of the evening. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ziyu. Ziyu is a software engineer on the Open Robotics team at Intrinsic, and she's also joining us from across the world. So she's focusing on OpenRMF and successful mobile robot deployments in hospitals. So welcome, Ziyu.
Hello, everyone. Is my slide showing? Yeah, I think it's showing. Yeah, hi. I'm C. I'm a robotics software engineer in Intrinsic, as mentioned, and I'm from the Singapore team. So yeah, this is where I am now. I'll just share a little bit about my experience here so far. A bit more about myself. So I also have a background in mechanical engineering. I studied at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. After graduation, I stayed on to do a master's in engineering research. So this video kind of shows the project that I was involved in. It is wire arc additive manufacturing, where they install a welding torch at the tip of a robot arm. So you're 3D printing metal parts for industrial users. And my research was to use machine learning strategies to optimize the process. So after that, I got into a local traineeship where it consisted of some courses that was leading up to a robotics diploma and followed by a 6-month internship with a robotics company. So this is where I first joined Open Robotics as an intern. This is also the first time I really learned how to code. Previously, I have really basic understanding of Python only, and yeah, it was intimidating at first to learn C++, but then the internship was obviously it worked out well because I eventually got converted to full-time here. And that is a selfie of me taking photo the day I realized that they updated the company website with my photo. So I'm really happy to be here. I've been learning a lot, which I'll share more a bit later. And yeah, so I've been mainly working on OpenRMF, implementing various type of adapters. But since I have your attention, I'll take the opportunity to share a bit about OpenRMF for anyone who's not familiar with it. RMF stands for Robotics Middleware Framework. So this is an interoperability framework that supports multi-fleet management. So you might have different types of robots, different models and brands. They use different protocols to communicate, and they all perform different types of tasks. So with RMF, you can sort of put them all together in a single environment to coexist and operate. Yeah, and one big feature about RMF is that we support traffic deconfliction between robots, so that even though the robots technically don't talk to each other in the same protocol, RMF is able to help manage their paths and deconflict to prevent any sort of deadlock, so that if their path overlaps, they won't get stuck looking at each other and being unable to move. So my part in OpenRMF revolves a lot around adapters, and a large part of that is the fleet adapter. So I think I mentioned earlier, different robots use different protocols to communicate. They may speak in different languages. So how are we supposed to know when there's a robot in front of me blocking my way when I want to move from point A to point B? And there's just no way to understand one another, no way to make sure that the robots can move in an orchestrated manner in a single environment. So that's where fleet adapters come in. each fleet adapter will sort of oversee their own sets of robots within the fleet. They will be able to speak the robot language. With the robot API, they can sort of gather where each robot current position is. They can send commands to the robot to move to a certain location. They can command a robot to perform a certain task, all using the robot's language. At the same time, the fleet adapter also knows how to speak to RMF with the predefined roster messages. So you can see how with a fleet adapter managing each of their fleets, RMF has an idea of where all the robots are at all times and manage and orchestrate their movement in the environment. So this also works for task allocation. RMF, when a task is submitted to RMF, the fleets are able to accept only the tasks that their robots are capable of doing, rather than accepting, for example, a cleaning task for a delivery robot. So I have been implementing different types of fleet adapters. It started with the demos fleet adapters when I was an intern here. And basically, we want to make sure that the simulated robots in Gazebo are able to demonstrate how an RMF framework is being implemented and and operates. Then following that, I also was in a project where we implemented a fleet adapter for simulated ships and boats in Unity. So this was pretty cool. All these robots are supposed to perform a complex custom task together, and the fleet adapter, inside the fleet adapter, we have to specify what types of actions the robot has to do at what point of time when other robots are around, etc. Yeah, then there are also other types of adapters that I got to work on. As you can imagine, when a robot moves around in the environment, it will have to pass through doors. It will have to use the lift to travel from one level to another. So here, the adapter is pretty much has the same concept as the fleet adapter. So RMF will be able to submit requests to these doors and lift adapters to ask the door to open or ask the lift to move to a certain level. And then the adapters themselves will relay the request to the actual door and lift hardware. And more recently, we started supporting beacons. So the beacon adapter basically requests for the beacons to light up whenever there is a robot detected to be nearby, so that human beings will be alert and aware that there are robots around and don't accidentally bump into them or something. Yeah. In the past year, a handful of members from the Singapore team have been working on a deployment in the local hospitals. So this involves a few fleets of mobile robots to be deployed in different parts of the hospital and to perform different types of delivery tasks. So my role here was to write the fleet adapter for them. So there are custom actions. For example, the robot with a cart here, you can see, we would have to write the logic for them to pick up and drop off the carts here. Yeah. And while it's very fun to work with real robots, this was the first time I got to have such a hands-on experience in this large-scale environment. But of course, there were a lot of challenges in the way. Obviously, in real life, it doesn't work as smoothly as simulation. So there are all sorts of problems that we face, such as the robot will just disconnect from the Wi-Fi network, and we have no idea where the robot is. The robots have to share a lot of resources and very limited space with human beings. So oftentimes they don't have much space to move around, and they don't have, and it was so easy to get stuck somewhere while a human is trying to access certain resources. Yeah, and because it's a super dynamic environment, there are also a lot of obstacles blocking the robot's path, and the robots will just get stuck somewhere and being unable to move, sometimes for hours. And and for some reason, the lift does not operate as it should. So we also have to spend a lot of time coordinating the workflow between robot travel in and out of the lift. Yes, but with all these challenges, of course, in hindsight, they're all really good because this allowed us to understand the problems that our open source community face even better up close firsthand. And we're able to identify a lot of the root causes of the issues that people were facing because now we are experiencing it ourselves. And yeah, and we also have access to the hardware now, so we can do a lot of rapid development to come up with super cool features and solutions to solve all the problems that we were having. So I was really glad that in the end, the issues that we were facing helped us to contribute back to the open source community and make RMF more robust for everyone to use. Yeah, so I'm sorry, but that is my journey with robotics and open source so far. I'm still at the very beginning of my career, just 3 years in, but I've been having a lot of fun. And I've been learning a lot from all the people around me. I'm surrounded by a very talented team of engineers, and more importantly, they have been very respectful and very encouraging regardless of gender. So since this is a Women in Robotics talk, I would also just share that I do struggle with being a woman in a male-dominated industry. Even though my team is very supportive, it was also super easy to fall into very traditional beliefs about gender roles, right? And sometimes I do struggle with the lack of self-confidence and feeling like I don't deserve to be here or belong here. So as an individual, I should continue to work on shifting my mindsets. But I would say that talks like this are very encouraging for me to be able to see and get to know more women in the field. And yeah, to also see more role models out there who look like me. And I believe that, us participating in these kind of events more would just encourage one another more, and also helps me build more confidence. So yeah, that's all I have to share. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ziyu. Any questions for her? Oh, we have one.
Hi, Shiyu. It's Matthew.
Oh, hello.
First, I'll just say you're a badass. Thank you for doing the presentation. I'm been impressed with what you've done for the past few years, and just want to say that to the group as well. Especially the fact that you didn't have software engineering background to begin with, so amazing. But my question is, the other 3 amazing women that were presenting before you are a little more experienced in their career. You're earlier on. What can we do as a community and as teammates to help you to grow?
Firstly, thanks, Matthew. And thanks for encouraging me to do this as well. I feel that so far, the things that have been really helpful for me is when my peers encourage me to speak up and share my thoughts, because there's a lot of ideas in my head thinking that my opinions are not valid, or I don't want people to know that I'm stupid. I don't dare to type in a public channel asking for a question, being afraid that they will think that everyone should know this. So I think encouraging, when people around me encourage me to speak up, to speak my mind, to share my opinions, is very helpful to force me out of my shell and sort of to allow me to know that, it's okay to be stupid even, but most of the time, I'm not really that stupid.
Any other questions? All right. So thank you, Ziyu, for sharing your experiences and contributions. And thank you to all our speakers for their inspiring talks tonight. And yeah. So with that, tonight has been a wonderful celebration of the achievements and contributions of women in open source. So let's continue to connect and share and celebrate our community. That ends our talk session for people online. You are welcome to stay back and chat for a bit. And for folks in the room, we have some things planned. So with that,